The ivory dress, a cascade of Italian silk and lace that my mother insisted was perfect for a modern princess, lay like a shroud of expectations across the velvet armchair in the corner of my spacious room at the Waldorf Astoria. The irony wasn't lost on me. A princess, yes, but one imprisoned in a fairy tale I never chose. Across the presidential suite, the lively buzz of the engagement party sounded like an impending sentence. Each laugh and toast another nail in the coffin of my freedom. I glanced at the diamond bracelet sparkling on my wrist. A welcome, too. The family gift from my future father-in-law, a real estate magnate with political connections as vast as his fortune. It was a symbol of my future, luxurious, secure, and utterly suffocating. At 22, I, Genevieve Moreau, the reluctant princess of a small European nation exiled on American soil, was hours away from being bound to a man who embodied everything I secretly despised: unchecked ambition, superficiality, and a worldview as narrow as the lane of an armored limousine. The thought of spending my life adorning the arm of a man who saw me as merely a trophy, a valuable piece to solidify his social empire, caused a physical unease, a constant nausea no calming tea from my lady-in-waiting could soothe. The panoramic window offered a dazzling view of Manhattan's twinkling lights at night, a labyrinth of possibilities pulsing in stark contrast to the narrow, predetermined path awaiting me. As the sound of champagne being poured and ceremonial speeches echoed through the closed door, a silent resolve began to solidify within me. That night, under the false glow of crystal chandeliers and the forced smiles of New York's high society, Princess Genevieve Moreau would make her final appearance. The imposed fairy tale was about to take an unexpected turn. The weight of the decision I had secretly nurtured for weeks intensified with every effusive greeting and condescending glance directed at me during the party. Protocol smiles adorned my lips while my mind churned with a bold, risky, and desperately necessary plan. I observed my fiancé, the charming and ruthless Daniel Hayes, as he dispensed handshakes and calculated laughs, captivating guests with his empty rhetoric and aura of unquestionable power. With each interaction, the distance between us grew more palpable to me, an unbridgeable chasm his millions and promises of a gilded future could never fill. I craved authenticity, a genuine connection that transcended ties of convenience and ambition. The idea of becoming Mrs. Daniel Hayes, living in an opulent mansion surrounded by sycophants and trapped in an endless cycle of social events and hollow obligations, caused an existential claustrophobia. My eyes scanned the ballroom, lingering briefly on the worried faces of my parents, who pinned all their hopes for stability and social acceptance on this marriage. Guilt tightened my chest, but the fear of a soulless life was an even heavier burden. With each sip of chilled champagne, my resolve strengthened. I wouldn't become a mere appendage to an empire, a decorative figure in a life that wasn't mine. Freedom, even if uncertain and solitary, seemed infinitely more valuable than the gilded cage offered to me. The night wore on, and with it, the countdown to the moment I would put my plan into action. Every kind word directed at me felt like a silent farewell. Every forced smile a veiled goodbye to the life everyone expected me to embrace. The princess was about to vanish, and in her place, a woman in search of her own truth was about to emerge. As the engagement night reached its peak, with a slow waltz filling the ballroom and couples twirling in a ballet of formality and feigned affection, I discreetly slipped away from the crowd. My steps led me through the labyrinthine corridors of the presidential suite, my heart pounding in a rhythm that echoed the urgency of my impending escape. In my room, the small suitcase I had secretly prepared over weeks awaited containing the essentials to allow me to disappear without a trace. I swapped the emerald silk gown, hand-picked by a renowned designer, for discreet comfortable clothes that would let me blend into the crowd unnoticed. The diamond bracelet, a symbol of my imminent captivity, was left on the dresser, a final act of defiance against the future awaiting me. I looked in the mirror one last time, the image of the princess giving way to a determined woman, her eyes gleaming with a resolve that earlier insecurities hadn't allowed. I took a deep breath, absorbing the magnitude of the moment. Leaving behind the security, however illusory, of my world, the protection, however suffocating, of my family, was a leap into the unknown. But the alternative, the slow erosion of my own identity, was a price I refused to pay. With the suitcase slung over my shoulder and my heart in my throat, I slipped silently out of the room, avoiding the curious glances of the few staffs still roaming the corridors. The party continued lively, oblivious to the quiet of my departure. I descended the service stairs, each step taking me further from my past and closer to an uncertain future, but for the first time, one chosen by me. Reaching the hotel's side exit, the cool night breeze of New York greeted me like a promise of freedom. Princess Genevieve had fled. The freedom I had so longed for proved a bittersweet companion in the first weeks after my escape from the Waldorf, Astoria. Stripped of the luxuries and security that had always permeated my existence, I found myself immersed in the vast anonymity of New York, a city that both swallowed and offered endless possibilities. I adopted the name Evie Moreau, discarding the title and weight of a past I yearned to leave behind. My initial refuge was a tiny shared apartment in Brooklyn, a world away from the opulent halls I once inhabited. The cultural shock was abrupt and at times humbling. Mundane tasks like navigating the subway, shopping in a crowded supermarket, or finding a job proved complex challenges for someone whose life had been meticulously orchestrated by others. Loneliness became a constant, a silent echo in the corners of my small room, contrasting with the ceaseless buzz of the city outside. Paradoxically, I missed the oppressive familiarity of my old life, the known faces, even if not always friendly, the predictable structure now replaced by disorienting freedom. Yet amidst the struggles and longing, a newfound sense of autonomy began to bloom. Each small victory, landing a job as a waitress in a bustling cafe, mastering the public transit system, befriending my eccentric roommate, was a personal triumph, a brick in the construction of a new identity forged by my own hands. I observed the people around me, fascinated by the ordinariness of their lives, their daily struggles, and the small joys that seemed to fulfill them. Slowly, I began to shed the armor of the princess, exposing a vulnerability I had never allowed myself to feel. And in that newfound fragility, paradoxically, I found unexpected strength, a resilience that propelled me forward, one day at a time, in search of a purpose that was truly mine. The cafe routine became my new palace, the strong aroma of coffee and the constant hum of customers replacing the ceremonious silence and whispers of the court. Initially clumsy and unsure, I quickly learned to balance loaded trays, memorize complex orders, and handle the eclectic mix of personalities frequenting the establishment. There was the elderly woman who came every morning to read her newspaper and sip a cappuccino, the group of art students passionately debating at makeshift tables, and the hurried couples exchanging quick kisses before facing the day. Observing them, briefly interacting with their lives, offered glimpses into a world previously inaccessible to me. For the first time, I was just Evie, the waitress, judged solely by the quality of my service and my friendliness, not by my surname or past. This anonymity was liberating, allowing me to experience the freedom of simply being me without the suffocating expectations of a title. It was amidst this new routine that I met Liam. He was a regular customer, a musician who usually sat at a table near the window, scribbling lyrics in a worn notebook while savoring a black coffee. There was something about his contemplative quiet, his deep blue eyes that seemed to carry unwritten melodies, that drew me in. Our interactions were initially limited to coffee orders and polite thank yous, but gradually we began exchanging words about the books he read or the music he occasionally strummed on an old guitar he carried. He never asked about my past, and I never offered details. There was a tacit understanding between us, a mutual respect for privacy and personal space. His presence at the cafe became a bright spot in my routine, a silent melody accompanying my days. Slowly, without my realizing, the loneliness that had haunted me began to fade, replaced by a gentle sense of connection, a promising note in the chaotic symphony of the city. One rainy day, when the cafe was unusually quiet, Liam dropped a notebook as he stood to leave. I picked it up to return it, and my eyes caught a scribbled phrase on one of the pages. "Freedom wears the unlikeliest disguise." That line resonated deeply within me, a silent epiphany that seemed to describe my own journey. As I handed it back, our fingers brushed briefly and a subtle jolt ran through me. For the first time, our gazes lingered, and in that fleeting moment, I felt an inexplicable connection, a mutual recognition that transcended words. From that day, our conversations grew longer, deeper, revealing unexpected affinities and a shared appreciation for the beauty in small things. Liam didn't see me as a fugitive princess or a mere waitress. He seemed to see the essence of who I truly was, beyond the masks life had forced me to wear. And in his eyes, for the first time since leaving my old world, I glimpsed the possibility of genuine love, unbound by titles or expectations, a love that blossomed in the freedom of being simply ourselves. My relationship with Liam blossomed like a soft melody amidst the frenetic rhythm of the city. Our meetings moved beyond the cafe, extending to walks in quiet parks, visits to hidden art galleries, and long conversations under the flickering lights of jazz bars. He showed me a New York I hadn't known existed, far from the towering skyscrapers and designer boutiques that had marked my brief time in high society. Through his eyes, I discovered beauty in everyday details, poetry in bustling streets, and magic in unexpected encounters. He never pressed me to talk about my past, accepting me for who I was in the present, Evie, the waitress with a melancholic gaze and a hesitant smile. This unconditional acceptance was liberating, allowing me to gradually lower the walls I had always built around myself. Yet the shadow of my past loomed over my new life, a silent threat I tried to ignore, but knew was inevitable. Small incidents began to unnerve me. A familiar face I thought I saw on the street, a vague newspaper article mentioning the princess's disappearance, a casual remark from a cafe customer about a resemblance to an old photo. Each event was like a needle piercing my false sense of security, reminding me that the world I had left behind hadn't forgotten me. Paranoia began to creep into my thoughts, making me question every glance, every question, every new interaction. The tension reached a breaking point on a rainy night. I was walking home from work when I noticed a black car following me through Brooklyn's deserted streets. The feeling of being watched, once a vague apprehension, became a terrifying certainty. I quickened my pace, my heart hammering, but the car maintained its speed, keeping a constant distance. Panic overtook me. I ran through dimly lit side streets, the sound of my shoes echoing in the night's silence. The image of my father's relentless security team burned into my mind. Finally, I managed to lose the car, taking refuge in the darkness of my building's entrance, my body trembling and breath ragged. That night, the fragility of my anonymous freedom became painfully clear. I could no longer ignore the looming threat. My past had found me, and the security I was beginning to build with Liam was at risk. I needed to make a drastic decision, one that could jeopardize everything I had gained. That night of being followed marked an irreversible turning point in my new life. The security I was starting to feel with Liam shattered, replaced by a desperate urgency to protect what we had built. I could no longer live under the constant fear of being discovered, of having my freedom stripped away and being forced back into the gilded cage I had escaped. The next morning, I shared what had happened with Liam, my voice thick with apprehension and fear of losing him too. To my surprise, there was no hesitation in his eyes, only a quiet determination to help. He, who had always valued discretion and simplicity, embraced the complexity of my situation without flinching. Together we devised a risky plan, to disappear again, this time more strategically and definitively. We knew New York was no longer safe. My past tentacles were long and well-funded. We needed a place where I could truly become Evie Moreau, without the constant specter of Genevieve hovering over me. Our combined savings, though modest, would be our starting capital. We researched tirelessly in public libraries and discreet internet cafes, seeking a refuge far from prying eyes and obvious connections. We considered small towns in the heartland, isolated communities, even crossing the border. The tension between us was palpable, blending fear of the unknown with the urgency to act. Every phone call, every stranger on the street kept us on edge. The sense of being watched was constant, even if it was just my growing paranoia. Yet amidst this atmosphere of apprehension, our relationship strengthened. Adversity bound us in a way that carefree walks and late-night talks never could. Liam proved a loyal and resourceful partner, his calm and practicality contrasting with my rising anxiety. He was my safe harbor in the brewing storm. The final decision was risky but seemed the only way out, to move to another state, a place where no one knew Genevieve Moreau, where Evie could finally have a chance to build a future free and with the man she loved. The time to act had come. With the little money we had and makeshift identities, we embarked on an uncertain journey. Westward, we left behind New York's chaotic familiarity, trading the city's ceaseless noise for the vast, sometimes desolate landscapes of America's heartland. Each stop at a cheap roadside motel, each hurried meal at a diner, was steeped in the anxiety of being discovered. Liam, with his battered guitar in tow, picked up occasional gigs in bars and small clubs, enough to keep us moving. I, with my limited skills and constant need for discretion, took temporary jobs, always under a different name, always with an eye out for any sign of recognition. Changing identities wasn't just about fake documents. It was a constant metamorphosis, a subtle adjustment in how I spoke, carried myself, and reacted to the world. I, who had been raised under rigid royal protocols, learned to blend in, to observe and mimic the mannerisms of ordinary people. It was an exhausting but necessary exercise for our survival. Slowly, as we moved further from the East Coast, the sense of immediate pursuit began to wane, giving way to persistent caution. We found refuge in a small Colorado town, nestled among the mountains, a place where strangers didn't draw much attention, and life moved at a slower, quieter pace. Liam landed a steady job at a local bar, playing his melancholic songs for a welcoming crowd, and I found work at a library, surrounded by books that had always been my silent confidants. For the first time since my escape, we began to glimpse the possibility of a normal life, a future where constant fear wasn't our only companion. Yet we knew our peace was fragile, a bubble ready to burst at the slightest brush with the outside world. The shadow of my past still loomed, a constant reminder that freedom comes at a price, and danger could lurk around any corner. behind any new face. The relative calm we found in Havenwood, Colorado, was short-lived. One night, while Liam played at the local bar, the rusty mug, a familiar figure appeared at the door. It was one of my father's security guards, a man with an impassive face and piercing gaze I'd recognize in any crowd. My blood ran cold. The mask of anonymity I had carefully constructed crumbled. He saw me. Our eyes locked for a fleeting moment, and in that brief exchange, I knew our escape was over. Panic threatened to paralyze me, but the sight of terror in Liam's eyes and the realization of imminent danger spurred us into action. We knew we didn't have time to flee again. Havenwood, our sanctuary, had become our trap. That night, we made a desperate decision. Instead of running, we would confront our past. Liam, with help from loyal friends we'd made in town, devised a risky plan to protect us. We knew my father's power was vast and his resources limitless, but we also had the element of surprise and the unexpected support of a community that had embraced us. The library where I worked became our impromptu command center. City maps and escape plans scribbled on paper napkins. Tension in Havenwood became palpable, the town's peaceful air giving way to charged suspense. We knew my father's men were coming, and we prepared for the final battle for our freedom. The love Liam and I shared and the loyalty of our new friends were our only weapons against the power and influence of my past. The hour of confrontation had arrived. The following dawn brought the silent arrival of black cars and stern-faced men to small Havenwood. The siege tightened. Liam and I, along with our unlikely allies, barricaded ourselves in the library, turning the sanctuary of knowledge into an impromptu fortress. The confrontation was inevitable, a clash between the world of power and privilege I had rejected and the humble freedom I had chosen. Words were exchanged, ultimatums issued, and the threat of violence hung in the air. At the story's climax, the final choice fell to me: yield to my past and return to the life that suffocated me, or fight for my right to love and live the life I had built with Liam. The decision I made in that moment would seal my fate and that of everyone around me. The fugitive princess had to become a warrior for her own freedom. In the tense silence of the surrounded library, my eyes met Liam's. In his gaze, there was no fear, only unwavering determination, and a love that gave me strength to face whatever came. I knew I could no longer run. Every step backward would put more lives at risk. The freedom I sought wasn't just for me, but for us, for the possibility of a future built on truth and genuine love, not the fragile foundations of an imposed past. With a deep breath, I stepped toward the library door, opening it to face the men who represented the world I had rejected. My father stood at the center, his imposing figure and face marked by cold, calculated fury. Behind him, his security team formed an impenetrable barrier. Little Havenwood seemed to hold its breath, watching the showdown between the fugitive princess and the power of her exiled kingdom. "Genevieve," my father's voice echoed in the quiet street, laden with disappointment and anger. "Come home. End this farce." His words were commands, the expectation of obedience still lingering. But the girl who once trembled under his gaze no longer existed. In her place stood a woman forged by adversity, strengthened by love, and determined to fight for her freedom. "This is my home now," I replied, my voice steady, surprising even myself, "and Liam is my family. I'm not going anywhere without him." My words were the catalyst. The tension erupted into action. My father's men advanced, and Havenwood's residents, led by Liam's friends, stepped in front of us, forming an unexpected line of defense. The library became the epicenter of an unlikely battle, books serving as shields and a community's determination as our greatest weapon. Amid the chaos, my eyes found Liam's again. We exchanged a quick smile. Silent pact to fight together until the end. The princess who fled in search of love had finally found a reason to stay and fight. The future, once predetermined, would now be written by our own hands. The months following that tense night in Havenwood brought a bittersweet peace. The confrontation didn't resolve with violence, but with a standoff. The community's resolve, coupled with my steadfast refusal to yield, forced my father to retreat, taking his men with a veiled promise that this wasn't the end. Yet, something had changed. The world had seen the fugitive princess take root in an unlikely place and fight for her freedom and love. The story had spread, even reaching the tabloids that once reported my arranged engagement. Havenwood became our sanctuary, not just a refuge, but a home. Liam continued playing at the Rusty Mug, his music now carrying a new depth inspired by the struggle and love we found there. I stayed at the library, surrounded by stories of others who, like me, sought their own paths. Slowly, my past's shadow began to fade, replaced by the light of a life built on conscious choices and genuine bonds. My father never again tried to forcibly bring me back. Perhaps he saw the futility of his efforts, or maybe, in some hidden corner of his heart, he glimpsed my happiness. Sporadic letters arrived through indirect channels, carrying more questions than accusations, a tacit acknowledgement that I had forged a path different from what he envisioned. Years later, sitting beside Liam on the porch of the small house we built on Havenwood's outskirts, watching the sun set over the mountains, I knew I had made the right choice. The scars of my past remained, silent reminders of the life I left behind, but they no longer hurt. They had become part of my story, proof that freedom and true love are worth fighting for. In my arms, our son slept, a quiet testament to a future. I chose myself, far from palaces and expectations, a future simple, authentic, and deeply mine. The princess who fled her wedding found more than love. She found herself.